it!
Why won't you adopt me?
Because you're black!
Hello everyone, Disaster Wolf Art here, and happy Black History Month. Today I wanted to address a topic that I've been thinking about covering for a minute now, which is black representation in the media, why I think it matters, and what issues I have regarding it. Also, I just want to say real quick before we begin, everything that I say in this video could apply to any and all groups of people in this world. All people deserve to be represented in various ways. I'm just choosing to focus on black people specifically today. All that being said, let's get into it.
Hey. Sin City was made, yeah.
Alright, this is the part where I rant about personal experiences, so I'll make this relatively quick. As a kid, I watched a lot of cartoons every day, and it gave me a lot of characters to really look up to as a child. But when it came to the people that looked like me, I had an issue with their typical and sometimes only archetypes. You see, growing up, I would pretty much only see black characters being portrayed as one of three things: the nerd, the jock, or the ghetto friend. I definitely couldn't relate to this because I wasn't your typical ghetto kid, and I damn sure wasn't an athlete. The only one that I might have connected with was a nerd because, well, I was a bit of a nerd. And apparently, I still am.
I'm so freaking ready to fight some freaking crime. Let's go.
But they would always either get picked on constantly or just be weird or creepy. AJ from the Fairly Odd Parents might have been the closest I really got to a positive representation of a nerdy black kid, but that was about it. I didn't really think of it much as a child, but looking back, it's no surprise why I didn't really feel connected to most of the black characters on screen. I never hated or disliked them, but I would almost always prefer the white protagonist over the black supporting characters. And part of that was admittedly because of that good old main character syndrome that a lot of kids had, but it also involved something bigger than that. For example, growing up, Scooby-Doo was my favorite series for the longest time. To be honest, I would still to this day be open to watching or rewatching any of the adaptations of those characters. Except for a certain, show we don't talk about.
The Special Covert Operations Brain Initiative, or Scooby.
Scooby? And wait, what did Scooby do?
Yeah, whoever wrote that line, seek a new career. But that aside, I loved that series growing up. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, but Wolfie, there's no black main characters in Scooby-Doo. And you'd be right. But that wasn't exactly a problem because I love the characters, especially Freddy. So much so that I actually wanted to dye my hair blonde and have it styled like Fred. And wear an ascot all the time. And looking back, that would have been a horrible idea because I would have been running around looking like a mini Cisco. Yeah, I would have gotten bullied something serious. But jokes aside, dyeing your hair blonde is not bad, but the reason why I wanted to was bad. It fed into this subconscious belief that I had to look a certain way just to be like this character that I liked at the time. It took me a good minute to realize that I could be Fred without trying to make myself white. I could still be that leader that takes charge and looks out for my friends. I could still hunt ghosts and solve mysteries while being black. It's really not that mind-blowing to think about as a 20-year-old, but the fact that I had to rewire my brain to think that way at all was a little concerning, and it made me wonder why I wasn't identifying with a lot of the black characters I would see as a kid, until it hit me. You see, it all has to do with this little word called variety.
So, what's up?
What's up? Struggle is up, brother. Oppression is up, brother. Salami, eggs, and bacon.
Nigga, what?
There's a term that I've heard. Variety is the spice of life. I don't exactly remember where I heard it from, but obviously it stuck with me. So how does this relate, you might ask? Well, after thinking about my self-image as a child, I realized that my mindset would have likely been very different if I had much more variety of black characters to look up to in the media. The thing is, you can always tell when there's some kind of effort put into the representation of a group of people. When there's no love or care put into something like this, it feels very much not genuine because it's not coming from people in that group. And that's not to say that you can't write a character of a different race, I do it all the time. But when you want to represent an entire group of people, you should probably do some research and have those people tell you what their experiences are. Otherwise, you're just going to get a complete mess like The Cleveland Show. The Cleveland Show is essentially Family Guy, but make it black. And on the surface, that sounds okay, but when it came out, the show heavily relied on the audience remembering, oh, this is the Black Family Guy show, without really having a purpose. It honestly feels more like the Family Guy writers throwing us a bone that we didn't ask for. There was no kind of appreciation or level of critique added to the story, at least not from what I've seen. That's not to say that this show had to be about racial issues, But if you're going to literally build a show on black culture, there should be a point to it. To be honest, the Boondocks did a way better job at this. I mean, yeah, it's made by a black guy, but it really does some interesting stuff. Personally, I actually like to call this show both a critique and love letter to the black community. It criticizes what other groups of people do to us and all the stupid shit we do to ourselves, all while showing a certain level of love and appreciation for ourselves. Every single main character shows a mix of character traits that shows duality and makes a statement. Huey sometimes shows a lack of empathy and takes things too seriously, but he genuinely loves his people and he wants to uplift them in a way that he can understand. Riley is too invested in the toxic expectations of boys and men in his community, but he has moments where his act breaks, reminding you that he's still just a scared child who just wants to find himself in a place where he belongs. And Granddad is selfish at times and quick to use his belt on the boys, but he can be very kind and loving towards the boys as well as other people, giving them genuine advice and trying to help people where he can. This level of detail in each of the main characters, as well as the side characters like Jasmine, Tom, and him.
I got rave vitiligo. Every year my skin just seemed to get blacker and darker and blacker and then more darker.
Definitely shows the amount of love and care put into each and every one of them. The amount of nuance shown in the portrayals of black people in the show is unlike anything I've ever seen. But what about characters that aren't just blackety black all the time? Well, one of my favorite examples of this is actually Cyborg from Teen Titans. Cyborg is not only one of my favorite DC heroes, but he's also one of my favorite black characters in television, period, because he doesn't just fit a stereotype. He's highly intelligent, he's goofy, he's empathetic, and he grows through his own personal struggles. While the Boondocks focuses on experiences in the black community specifically, Cyborg is a character that focuses on what it means to be human. Most of what he goes through in his story revolves around the fact that he is no longer fully human, and you can tell that it really messes with him at times. But with the help of his team and his friends, he recognizes that he is still human and that he can still push past his limits. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the episode that talks about racism, though what's interesting to me about it is that Cyborg is actually not the one who experiences racism in the episode. It's Starfire. And what's even more interesting is that Cyborg never mentions the fact that he's black when he explains why he understands why Starfire feels the way that she does when she's called a troc, which essentially is a racial slur for her race in order to call them worthless. Instead, what Cyborg does is relate it back to his life as a cyborg. His lived experience is that people judge him based on the way that he looks because he's only considered half a human, if at all. It's the kind of theming that adds a whole new layer to Cyborg's struggles in the show, and it's also something that a lot of people, including black people, can relate to. So I could talk about this all day long, but I don't want this section to get too long, so I'll just look into one more character here. My current favorite show, Arcane, features a lot of memorable characters and it reshapes the relationship between the cities of Zon and Piltover, with the former being economically and violently oppressed by the latter, to make a long story short. Mel Medarda is actually one of the most interesting characters to come out of this show for me. You see, in Arcane, race holds no relevance to power and personal perception, but that doesn't mean that she has no struggles. Mel Medarda became a councilwoman in Piltover after her family, specifically her mother, disowned her for being too soft. The Medarda clan pride themselves as rough and quick to act like wolves, but Mel's brother viewed himself more as a fox, talking his way out of conflict and using much more manipulative tactics for the greater good. For years, Mel viewed herself as the same way that her brother did, which was fox-like. She bribed the other council members with gifts constantly. She advocated the potential of Jace's inventions, and she's incredibly calculated. But she's still compassionate, she values the safety of everyone around her, and she's merciful. Every single act of manipulation she committed was for the good of Piltover, and not just herself. She valued the safety, prosperity, and diplomacy of her city. This is directly contrasted with her mother, who values the safety and prosperity of her family, including Mel. We later found out that her mother only banished her because she felt that Mel's kindness would prevent her from making any decisions that would ensure the safety of her family, which was typically through the act of violence. Mel is a prime example that blackness does not have to be the character's struggle. Mel didn't experience racism, but she did experience a strained relationship with her mother, the struggle to keep everyone around her safe, and the struggle of being an outcast who had to build a new life for themselves. It's all what makes her one of my favorite characters in the show. So if I like these characters who are clearly black for a specific reason, why do I still love characters like Miles, Garnet, and Gus? Well, to make a long story short, I just like having different characters and different stories. There are all types of black people in this world. We're not all athletes, drug dealers, ghetto best friends, and mammies. We can be those things, but for various reasons, but that doesn't exclusively nor completely represent the whole of black people. We are so much more than that. We can be the bully, we can be the nerd, we can be the artist, the princess, the doctor, the musician, you name it. Hell, we can even just be that one guy just trying to get through the day. But at the end of the day, we aren't all just the same, and we don't all have the same aspirations. Each and every one of these examples emphasizes the point that there's no one way to be black. It's something that I really could have used as a kid in the cartoons that I watched.
How'd you get way up there?
And how'd I get way down here and all this?
Okay, fair warning, I'm going to be picking on Disney here for this section, but this really applies to a lot of other studios. I just need to make more of a focus point for this one. So, I've been watching cartoons and anime since I was a little kid, and Disney was a very large part of that. I often found myself enjoying the classics like Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, and The Jungle Book. And I have a different kind of love for a lot of the modern stories like Encanto, 2023's The Haunted Mansion, and Elemental. I'm not going to get into the repeated blackface and other racist shit that happened from the early days of Disney, because it was wrong as hell, but it would be too easy. But I'd be lying if I said that Disney did not have a history of consistently doing black leads so dirty. For example, I loved The Princess and the Frog in 2011. I enjoyed the American setting, the general message of working hard but still living in the moment, and most importantly the fact that we finally got a black Disney princess. But unfortunately, it came with a lot of problems. You see, Princess Tiana spends the majority of her own film as a frog, and she doesn't even get a black love interest. You see, as a kid, I kind of assumed that Naveen was black, but he's actually racially ambiguous. He's from a fictional land, but Naveen is an Indian name, and his mother wears a sari, so if anything, I read him as more Indian than black. And it's funny to me how the villain of the film is undeniably black, but the male love interest is a question mark. Real cool, Disney. By the way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with interracial relationships. I just want a black Disney prince for once. And this also means that 2 of the 4 POC Disney princesses in the official lineup end up in interracial relationships. And they're the darkest ones. Interesting. My thing is, I wouldn't even have an issue with these tropes if Tiana wasn't literally one of the only black female leads we've had in an animated Disney film for years until Wish in 2023. At the time of writing this script, I haven't seen it, but yikes, reviews are not looking too hot. But back to the animal thing, Tiana actually isn't the only black lead that Disney has done this to. Disney's Soul is another good example of this that has me equally torn. I loved the film, and I loved finally having a black male lead in a Disney animated film. The focus on creativity and jazz being what makes Joe want to live his life definitely helped me relate to his struggle. But once again, one of the very few black protagonists that we have not only gets turned into a small blue blob, but also a cat for the second part of the film. They love turning us into non-humans. I can't stand it. Can black people just be black people in their movies? These films by themselves are not bad films. But when you look at the cores of these films, you can clearly see that they're rooted in pure ignorance. Yet we cling on to them because this is all we have, even if it's just crumbs of representation. I can see that Disney is trying to make up for the past, but it's kind of hard to do that when everything that makes minorities feel like actual people is seen as woke. And let's be honest, Disney doesn't actually give a shit about marginalized groups of people. That's not to say that there aren't some genuine efforts to allow people to feel seen and heard, because there are. I mean, look at Encanto, look at Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, look at Black Panther. But Disney as a whole doesn't care about minorities. They care about making money, which is exactly why Strange World practically ended up in marketing hell. And don't get me started on the near constant race swapping. I mean, look at The Little Mermaid, for example, right? Halle Bailey's portrayal of Ariel was on point. She felt like the same Ariel from the cartoon, and her singing was nothing short of beautiful. I don't blame her for taking up this role at all, and she did an amazing job. But isn't it kind of funny how instead of giving black people our own original films where we don't have to turn into an animal or where we don't face financial issues, didn't even get on that in the Princess and the Frog part of this, but y'all probably know if y'all watch the movie. Disney would rather use our blackness as a reskin of white characters. I really thought that a Little Mermaid adaptation that was rooted in the Caribbean was a great idea. We would have actually gotten to see this story taken in a unique visual and narrative direction, which could have set it apart from the original 1989 film. But instead, we just get a rehash of the original film with changes that were so minor they may as well have not even existed. I like the movie overall, but when you connect it to the topic of representation, it falls flat. It did nothing different with the story to stand out except for the fact that a black woman was playing the protagonist. Not to mention the fact that instead of fully leaning on the clearly more black-centric aesthetic with the Caribbean setting that they were going for, they instead went out of their way to say that Eric was adopted to justify the fact that he was played by a white man. And don't get me wrong, Jonah King was really good in this film. I liked him. But y'all really couldn't have found a black man who could play Eric? Even in The Leftovers, they won't give us a black Disney prince or showcase some kind of black love. I'm all here for interracial relationships, I really am. But I still want to be able to see two black people get together and be cheesy and cute for once. Like, is that really too much to ask, Disney? I'm a fan of colorblind casting, but this just feels like fake representation. I've noticed a trend in the industry in general where non-black characters keep ending up as black in reboots, yet these corporations refuse to give black people sufficient representation in new original stories. I don't mind the occasional race bending of most characters, especially when the race has nothing to do with the story. But give us more stories of black people from the jump. That's all I'm asking.
Did you enjoy yourself? I know I didn't. I did not watching that. I wanted to gouge my own eyes out.
The topic of representation is one that definitely can divide people, but I really wanted to put my voice out there and see what other people might think. As a black person, a black male, and a black artist, I feel like these things really do affect me and how the world sees me. I'll criticize my own people for all the stuff that goes on in our community, but I will always see the beauty in my skin, my hair, my culture, and my people. I just wish that other people in and outside of my community would see that too. But what do you think of this topic? Do you think representation matters the way that I do, or do you look at this issue a little differently? Let's get a conversation going in the comments. Just please be respectful to each other, that's all I ask. But anyways, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, or at least thought it was interesting. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and slap that little gray bell so that you get all the newest notifications. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!